England was not at war. There was no invasion, no rebellion. And yet, in the summer of 1348, entire towns began to disappear. A man could wake healthy and be dead within 3 days. A village could lose half its people before the month ended. Priests died faster than they could bury the dead. Fields went unharvested. Church bells rang until there was no one left to ring them. Within 2 years, perhaps half of England was gone. Not from battle, not from famine, but from something no one could see and no one could stop. This was the year survival became random, and once it began, there was nowhere in England to escape. It came by ship. A vessel from Gascony docked at Melcombe, the harbour near Weymouth, sometime before 24th June 1348. The Grey Friars Chronicle records it as the moment England's catastrophe began. From Weymouth it moved fast, west into Dorset, then into Devon and Somerset, then north into Bristol, one of England's largest and busiest cities. A chronicler wrote that the plague made the countryside quite void of inhabitants. Gloucester refused entry to Bristol men. It did not matter. The disease did not need permission to travel. By autumn of 1348, it had reached London. England had around 6 million people at the start of that year. Within 2 years, that number was heading toward 3 million. Nearly half gone. And the country had only just begun to understand what it was facing. To understand how England fell so fast, you have to understand what the plague did to the human body. The bacterium responsible was Yersinia pestis. It spread primarily through the bites of infected fleas, fleas that lived on rats and on the grain, cloth and timber moving through every English market town. Once inside the body, it moved through the lymphatic system. Within days, the lymph nodes swelled, hard, painful lumps appearing in the groin, the armpit, or the neck. These were called buboes. This was bubonic plague. But England also saw the pneumonic form, an infection of the lungs spread through breath and proximity alone. This version killed faster. It needed no flea, no rat, only closeness. A third form, septicemic plague, drove the bacteria directly into the bloodstream. It left almost no time between infection and death. Fever followed, blackening of the skin. Death came within days of the first symptoms. Medieval physicians bled their patients. They used herbs and prayer. They recorded what they saw. And they could not explain why one household lost 4 people, while the man next door never fell ill at all. That question, unanswerable in 1348, would haunt England for the next 3 years. By the winter of 1348, the plague was no longer a coastal problem. It was inland, moving along every road, every river, every trade route England had built over centuries. From Bristol, it followed the merchants. It followed the pilgrims. It followed the grain carts. Winchester fell, Salisbury fell, Oxford fell. It reached London by 3 routes simultaneously. Overland from Weymouth through Salisbury, overland from Gloucester, and along the coast by ship. London's streets were narrow and running with sewage. Its houses were overcrowded. Its waterfront was one of the busiest trading corridors in Northern Europe. It was, in almost every way, ideal territory for the plague. Outside the city walls, burial pits were opened at Smithfield, at East Smithfield, because parish churchyards had simply run out of ground. By the spring of 1349, the disease was spreading across all of southern England. By summer, it had turned north. Yorkshire, Durham, Cumberland, counties already weakened by decades of Scottish raids, left especially exposed. Distance had offered delay, not protection. England was learning that in a connected kingdom there was no edge remote enough, no community isolated enough to hide behind. In medieval England, the church was not simply a religious institution. It was the infrastructure of daily life. Priests recorded births and deaths. They administered last rites. They ran hospitals. They were the first point of contact between ordinary people and any form of organized authority. And the plague killed them in extraordinary numbers. Their role required proximity to the sick and the dying. There was no way to perform last rites from a distance, no way to bury the dead without handling them. In the Diocese of Bath and Wells, the bishop issued an emergency order in 1348, permitting the dying to confess to a layperson, or even to a woman, if no priest could be found in time. This was not a minor adjustment, it was a theological emergency. In the Diocese of York, estimates suggest that up to 48% of parish clergy died within 2 years. The church responded by ordaining men with minimal training. In 1349 alone, the number of newly ordained clergy nearly tripled compared to 1346. But the damage ran deeper than numbers. People had watched their priests die at the same rate as everyone else, despite their supposed closeness to God. That observation planted a seed of doubt that would grow slowly into one of the most significant challenges to church authority England had ever seen. England in 1348 was overwhelmingly a rural country. Close to 90% of its people lived not in cities, but in villages, on manors, in small farming communities scattered across the countryside. This is where the plague's weight fell hardest. A village might have 100 people. A single outbreak could kill 60 of them in weeks. And unlike a city, a village had no surplus, no reserve population to absorb the loss. When the ploughman died, the fields went unworked. When the miller died, the grain went unground. When the reeve died, the man who managed the manor's day-to-day labor, the entire economic structure of a community could simply stop functioning. On some of the Bishop of Worcester's estates, mortality among tenants reached 80%. Other manors nearby lost fewer than 1 in 5. The plague did not fall evenly, but it fell everywhere. More than 1,300 English villages vanished between 1350 and 1500. Ghost communities swallowed back into farmland and forest. The land survived. The mills survived. The field boundaries survived. But the people who had worked that land for generations, who had known every acre, every neighbor, every season, were gone. And what remained was a country that looked the same from above, but was hollow underneath. When people did not know what caused the plague, they ran from it. The wealthy had options, the poor did not. Landowners retreated to country estates. Bishops moved between residences. Merchants closed their premises and left for smaller, quieter settlements. But flight carried a brutal irony. Those who fled often carried the disease with them, arriving in places not yet infected, seeding new outbreaks in communities that had so far been spared. The roads of England became vectors as much as escape routes. For those who could not flee, the labourers, the serfs, the destitute, survival meant enduring in place. Watching neighbours die, waiting for a turn that might never come, or might come tomorrow. social bonds began to snap under the pressure. Contemporary chroniclers recorded people abandoning the sick, even within families. Parents leaving children, children leaving parents. This was not universal. Many showed extraordinary courage and care in the face of it. But the rupture in normal behavior was recorded repeatedly across different counties by different writers who had no contact with one another. What the plague attacked was not only the body, it attacked the web of obligation and trust that held English society together. And once that web began to tear, no ordinance from the crown could fully repair it. The dead left behind more than grief. They left behind land, livestock, tools, unpaid rents, and untended crops. And they left behind a labour market that had been turned completely upside down. Before 1348, England had more workers than work. Lords held power over peasants simply because survival depended on access to land. Wages were low, conditions were fixed. After the plague, that equation reversed. The living were suddenly scarce, and the scarce have leverage. Surviving labourers began demanding higher wages, sometimes double or triple pre-plague rates. At some Oxfordshire manors, ploughmen were demanding 5 times what they had earned before 1348. Lords were furious, but they were also desperate. Harvests could not wait. Animals needed tending, and the dead were not coming back. The Crown watched the old order dissolving in real time. In 1349, Edward III issued the Ordinance of Labourers, attempting to freeze wages at pre-plague levels. 2 years later, the Statute of Labourers made it a criminal offence to demand or offer wages above the old rates. It was an attempt to legislate away the consequences of catastrophe. English courts pursued hundreds of violations every year, and yet wages kept rising. The law could punish individuals. It could not reverse the arithmetic of mass death. The body could be killed in days, but the mind had to keep living through the deaths of neighbours, of family, of entire communities, with no explanation that made sense. Medieval England had a framework for suffering. It was theological. God sent affliction as punishment for sin. Plague, therefore, was divine judgment. This was the official position of the Church, repeated from pulpits across the country. And so many turned inward. Fasting, prayer, confession. Some gave away possessions, believing the end of the world was not a metaphor, but an imminent reality. Unlike on the continent, England saw no widespread bands of roving flagellants. But the intensity of private piety deepened considerably. Others responded differently. Chroniclers noted a turn toward recklessness in some quarters, eating, drinking, spending, as though restraint had lost its purpose when death arrived regardless of behavior. Both responses were rational answers to an irrational situation. When survival appears random, human beings search for control wherever they can find it. The plague had fractured something in the medieval mind's relationship with certainty. Not the faith itself for most, but the confidence that faith offered reliable protection, that the devout would be spared and the corrupt would fall. The evidence by 1349 was pointing in the other direction. The question medieval England could not answer, and that historians still approach carefully today, is why some people lived. Survival was not a matter of wealth. Wealthy people died, bishops died, knights died. Edward III's own daughter Joan died of the plague in the summer of 1348. on her way through France to her wedding. She'd been moved to a small village to avoid the outbreak in her household. It made no difference. Poverty increased exposure. Through overcrowding, poor nutrition, proximity to rats and refuse. But wealth offered only partial shelter. Some of what determined survival was biological. Modern research suggests that certain genetic variants, particularly mutations affecting immune response, may have offered partial resistance to Yersinia pestis. Those who carried them were more likely to survive, more likely to pass those variants to their children. The plague may have reshaped not just English society, but the English immune system over generations. In 1348, none of this was visible or understood. What survivors experienced was simpler and more disorienting. A husband died, a wife lived. 2 children in the same house, one taken, one untouched. A priest tended the dying for months and never fell ill. His replacement died within a week of arriving. There was no pattern anyone could read. And the absence of a pattern was, in many ways, the most frightening thing of all. By 1351, the worst was over. But the plague was not finished with England. It returned in 1361, killing around 20% of those who remained. Again in 1369. Again in 1375. England would endure repeated plague years for over a century. The population would not recover to pre-plague levels for well over 100 years. In some estimates, closer to 2 centuries. That demographic void reshaped everything it touched. Rents fell because landlords had no choice. Surviving peasants inherited holdings that would previously have taken generations to acquire. The average size of the peasant holding grew steadily across the late medieval period. The statute of labourers was enforced with determined vigour, but wages kept rising regardless, and the resentment built. By 1381, 30 years after the plague's first wave, it erupted. The peasants' revolt began in Kent and Essex. Rebels marched on London. They burned the Savoy Palace. They killed the Chancellor and the Archbishop of Canterbury's aide. They demanded the complete abolition of serfdom. The rebellion was suppressed. But by around 1400, serfdom in England was virtually extinct, replaced by freer forms of land tenure. The plague had not intended to liberate anyone, but mass death, as a force, does not consult the intentions of the powerful. Survival was not a reward, it was a burden. The people who lived through the Black Death in England did not emerge into relief. They emerged into absence. Absence of neighbours. Absence of the familiar rhythms of parish life. Absence of the assumption that the world was stable, that the people around you would be there tomorrow. That assumption never fully returned. England rebuilt, slowly. Fields were replanted. Churches found new priests. Markets reopened. Children were born into a country with more land and more opportunity than the generation before them had ever known. But the generation that had lived through it carried something that did not dissolve. They had watched the righteous die and the careless live. They had buried people they loved in mass graves, without ceremony, without the rites their faith had promised. That experience left a permanent mark. The shortage of skilled craftsmen shifted cathedral architecture from elaborate decorated stonework to the simpler, faster perpendicular style. The loss of French-speaking teachers accelerated vernacular English, helping give rise to writers like Geoffrey Chaucer. The Black Death did not only kill people, it ended a way of understanding the world, one in which suffering had clear cause and the future could be reasonably predicted. England survived, just not unchanged, and neither would any society that has ever faced what England faced in those 3 years. The question is not just what they endured. The question is what we would do if it happened again. If you found this story worth telling, share it with someone who needs to hear it.